The transfer file came through on a slow Tuesday, and Instructor Gorith almost deleted it by accident. He read it twice, then a third time. Then he set it down and stared at the wall of his office for a long moment, the way a being stares when reality has said something rude to them. A human. They had sent him a human. Gorith was Dravkin, stone-skinned, four-armed, built like a wall that had decided to start walking. He had trained cadets for 19 cycles. He had shaped Trilothi assassins, Borati heavies, Polhari scouts. He had taken raw biological weapons and turned them into soldiers. He had never trained a human. That he pulled up the species file. Soft skin, one set of arms, no venom, no claws worth mentioning, no enhanced visual range, moderate speed, moderate strength, moderate everything. The file used the word moderate so many times it started to feel like an insult. I could see the bottom. Under special abilities, someone had typed endurance, problem solving, social adaptability. Gorith closed the file. He would believe it when he saw it. Rail arrived on a transport shuttle with 12 pieces of luggage and a calm expression that did not match his situation at all. He was lean, not thin in a dangerous way, just lean, like something that had been used regularly and maintained well. He had dark eyes that moved around the docking bay with quiet interest, the way eyes move when a mind is actually paying attention. But he did not look impressed. He did not look afraid. He looked like someone who had arrived somewhere new and was simply taking notes. The first assessment was physical. It always was. The cadets lined up in the main evaluation hall, a high-ceilinged space with white floors that recorded every reading automatically. Sova went first. She was Trilothi, six-limbed, built for speed and precision. Her assessment scores lit up the board in sharp green numbers. The cadets watching made appreciative sounds. Dunn went second. Borati. He was roughly the size of a ground vehicle and about as subtle. His strength scores broke the previous cycle's record. He seemed unaware of this, mostly because he was unaware of most things. Then Rail stepped onto the platform. The board recorded. The numbers came up. There was a silence in the hall that had texture to it. Sova tilted her head. One of her secondary arms gestured at the board in a way that was not kind. A few cadets made sounds that translated loosely as polite confusion, which was the Galactic Academy version of laughing. Gorith read the numbers without expression. Then he looked at Rail. These are your complete results. Yes, Rail said. No augmentation. No biological advantages on record. No. Why are you here? It was not a question. It came out flat, the way Gorith said most things. Rail looked at him evenly. Same reason anyone's here. To learn. To be useful. Gorith said nothing. He moved on to the next cadet. Tea the evening meal. Rail sat at the end of a long table. Most cadets left a gap around him. Not out of cruelty, just uncertainty. He was an unknown variable, and unknown variables made people uncomfortable. Yiv sat down next to him anyway. Yiv was Polhari, small, round-faced, with large amber eyes and the general energy of someone who had been nervous since birth. He was the second lowest ranked cadet in the intake group. He had apparently decided that this made him and Rail natural allies. They're saying you don't have anything, Yiv said quietly. He was not trying to be rude. He was genuinely curious and had not yet learned to disguise it. I have things, Rail said. He was eating steadily, working through the tray in front of him with focus. Like what? Rail thought about it. I know how most things break, and I know how to fix most things that break, and I can keep going after most beings would stop. You've considered this. That doesn't sound like much. It sounds like exactly enough, Rail said. He did not say it with heat. He said the way someone states a fact they have already verified. Yiv didn't have an answer for that, so he started eating too. Later, the lights in the barracks dimmed to sleeping cycle. The station settled into its nighttime hum. Most cadets dropped into their rest states quickly. The assessment day had burned energy from everyone. Rail lay on his bunk and looked at the ceiling. He was not worried. He had been the smallest thing in many rooms before this one. He had learned early that size was only one kind of power, and usually not the most interesting kind. He closed his eyes. He had been asleep for perhaps 2 hours when the alarm changed pitch, not the routine cycle alert. Something lower. Something that meant a system had failed somewhere in the station's body. A pressurization fault. according to the tone. The kind of thing that could become serious very quickly in the sections below the main deck. Rail was off his bunk before the alert finished its second cycle. He was already moving down the corridor toward the maintenance ladder when he heard Yiv's voice behind him, confused and half awake. "Where are you going?" Rail didn't slow down. "Someone's going to need help." He dropped into the dark. The maintenance corridors below Deck 4 were not built for comfort. They were built for pipes and cables and the occasional engineer who had done something to deserve the assignment. The lighting down there ran on a secondary grid, and when the secondary grid failed, which it had just done, the darkness was complete. Not dim, not shadowy, complete. Rail moved through it with one hand on the wall, and his ears doing the work his eyes could not. The pressure alarm was still sounding, a low rhythmic tone that bounced strangely through the narrow passages. He followed it the way you follow a sound when you don't have anything better to follow, steadily, adjusting when the echo changed, moving toward where it was loudest. Behind him, a soft thud and a sharp intake of breath. "I can't see anything," Yiv whispered. Rail had not heard him come down the ladder. "Stay close. Put your hand on my shoulder. You can see in this." "No, I can hear. Keep quiet and follow." Yiv's small hand found his shoulder and gripped it with an intensity that suggested he was not going to let go under any circumstances. Rail didn't mind. He moved forward, slower now, tracing the wall with his fingertips. The Polhari had good eyes in low light. Total darkness was apparently a different problem. Yiv was completely blind down here, running entirely on trust and the grip he had on Rail's shoulder. Rail found the first junction by feel. Left passage, the pressure tone was stronger. He turned left. "How do you know where you're going?" Yiv asked, barely above a whisper. "The sound. And the air pressure is slightly lower this direction. Something's leaking. You can feel that. Humans grew up in places that tried to kill them regularly," Rail said. "You learn to read small things." They moved through 2 more junctions. The tone was getting louder, and now there was something else, a faint hiss, steady and sharp. The sound of atmosphere escaping somewhere it was not supposed to be. And then voices. 2 of them, speaking in the Harath trade dialect, which Rail had spent 6 weeks learning before the transfer, because he had looked up the Academy's staff composition and made a list. He spoke back to them. The voices went quiet with surprise. Then one of them answered, shakier now, explaining the situation rapidly. Rail translated for Yiv in a low voice. 2 maintenance workers. The pressure valve on the tertiary line failed. They've manually sealed their section, but the seal won't hold long. The leak is about 10 meters ahead. They can't fix it because they can't get to the access panel from their side of the break. Can we get to it from our side? That's why I'm here. He found the workers by sound and touch, both Harath, squat and broad, with wide flat faces that were currently doing an excellent impression of beings who had accepted death and were only mildly unhappy about it. The Harath paralysis response under fear was well documented. They were alive and aware, but couldn't make themselves move. Rail spoke to them calmly, told them what he was going to do, told them the access panel location from their description. The panel was where they said it would be. He felt along the frame until his fingers found the manual override latch, standard across most Union Station builds, a detail he had memorized from the technical orientation packet that every new cadet received and almost no one actually read. The valve required force. He put his body into it, both hands, shifting his weight the way you shift weight when the task doesn't care how much it hurts. The valve resisted, then turned, then seated with a solid thunk that he felt through his palms. The hissing stopped. The pressure tone continued for a few more seconds, then shifted pitch and went quiet. "That's it," Yiv asked. "That's it." He helped the 2 Harath workers to the ladder by feel, Yiv talking to them gently once he realized they were frightened, using the few words of their dialect Rail had taught him on the walk over. "Small things. It's all right. You're all right. We have you." They got out. All 4 of them. The corridor lights were already cycling back on as the secondary grid rerouted in the full light of the main deck. One of the workers looked at Rail with an expression that was hard to read across species lines, but was somewhere in the region of bewildered gratitude. He said something. Yiv looked at Rail. "What did he say?" He asked how I could see down there. Rail was already checking his hands, which were scraped from the valve work. Nothing serious. I told them I couldn't. Back at the barracks, the other cadets were awake, clustered near the corridor entrance in varying states of confusion. Someone had presumably explained the alarm. No one had apparently followed. Instructor Gorath was standing near the entry point. He had clearly been reviewing the station's system logs on his personal pad. He looked up when Rail came through. He did not say anything, but he looked at Rail for a long moment with an expression that Rail could not fully read. Not approval, not warmth, something more careful than either of those things. Like a calculation being quietly revised. Then Gorath turned and walked away. Across the room, Sova was sitting upright on her bunk. All six of her eyes were open. She watched Rail cross the floor, and for the first time since the transfer file had come through, she was not making any sound at all. Yiv sat down on his bunk and let out a long, shaking breath. You could have told me the plan before going into the dark. The plan was, find the problem, fix it, come back. Rail sat down and looked at his hands. It's the same plan every time. The Crucible did not have a gentle reputation. IT was the Academy's main simulation arena, a wide multi-environment space that could shift terrain at the instructor's command. Sand, ice, rubble, dense terrain. The walls could close in or open out. The lighting could drop to nothing. It had broken the confidence of cadets who came believing they were already soldiers and left understanding they had been something much less. Today, it was set to rubble. Broken structures, low visibility, unstable ground. Gorath stood at the observation platform above and read the squad assignments without commentary. 4 squads. For extraction objectives. The goal was to reach a signal beacon at the far end of the arena, retrieve the marker, and extract every squad member intact. Every member intact. That detail mattered at Rail's squad was Sova, Dunn, Yiv, and himself. On paper, it was the weakest combination by standard metrics. Sova's individual scores were high, but her file noted a strong preference for solo operation. Dunn was powerful but slow to adapt. Yiv was not built for this kind of environment, and Rail was Rail. The other squads noticed the grouping. There were no comments, but there didn't need to be. The doors opened. The squads moved and Rail's team moved together. That was the first thing. No one sprinted ahead. No one held back. Rail set the pace, steady, deliberate, watching the ground before each step. Sova was visibly uncomfortable with this. She could have been across the arena already. Her secondary arms kept shifting, the trilithai equivalent of tapping fingers. But she matched the pace. Rail had said one sentence before they entered. We finish together or we don't finish at all. He had said it without drama, and somehow that made it land harder than drama would have. Dunn moved like furniture that had decided to relocate. He was not graceful, but he was reliable, and when Rail pointed him at an obstacle, he removed it efficiently. Yiv stayed in the middle of the group and was doing his best, which was more than anyone had expected. They were halfway to the beacon when Dunn's suit locked at IT was the simulation's injury mechanic, a random malfunction trigger that immobilized one limb. Dunn's right arm went rigid, locked against his side. A combat simulation injury. In a real scenario, it would be damage he couldn't walk off. The squad stopped. Leave the marker path open, Sova said immediately. Her math was clean. Dunn was slowing them down. The other squads were already ahead. Dunn said nothing. He looked at his locked arm with a mild expression of someone who had found a minor inconvenience. Rail looked at the situation for perhaps 3 seconds. Sova, you're on the left flank. Watch the high terrain. Dunn, you're moving with us. Yiv stays on your right side to cover your locked arm. I'll take point. That slows us down significantly, Sova said. Yes. We lose the time advantage. Yes. She looked at him. Something behind her eyes ran a calculation. Then she moved to the left flank without another word. They moved slower. The other squads pulled further ahead. One squad crossed the midpoint marker at nearly double their pace. Rail navigated by observation. He watched the terrain, found the stable paths, chose routes that worked for a 6-member group moving as a unit rather than the fastest line between 2 points. When the arena shifted a section of rubble into a new configuration, as it sometimes did, to test adaptability, he adjusted without panic, walked the new layout for 30 seconds, and redirected. Yiv stayed close to Dunn and talked to him quietly. Small things. Steady things. The kind of talking that is less about information and more about letting someone know they are not alone in a difficult space. Dunn, who communicated mostly through action rather than words, responded by putting his working hand briefly on Yiv's shoulder as they moved. It was a Borty gesture. It meant something. They reached the beacon last. Rail retrieved the marker. Every member of the squad was present and functional. He looked back at the group, Sova scanning the terrain out of habit, Dunn solid and unbroken, Yiv breathing hard but upright. They extracted, I end the results review. Gorith read the scores aloud. Time rankings. Rail squad was last. Objective completion. 4 squads retrieved the beacon. 0 casualty extraction. 1 squad that he did not add commentary. He read the number and moved on. But in the official log, under Rail's record, a single note was added in Gorith's handwriting. Refused standard protocol. Maintained unit integrity. Adapted route under terrain shift. Squad intact. After the debrief, the cadets moved to the mess hall. Rail sat down with his tray. A moment later, Dunn sat directly beside him, so close their shoulders were touching, and did not move for the rest of the meal. Yiv appeared on Rail's other side. Dunn hasn't sat that close to anyone since intake, he said quietly. I noticed. It's a loyalty thing. Bority means he trusts you. Rail looked at Dunn, who was eating with single-minded focus. I know. I read the file. Yiv was quiet for a moment. You read everyone's files? Before I got here, all species I'd be working with. Rail picked up his drink. If someone's going to trust me, I should understand them first. Across the mess hall, Sova sat alone at her usual spot. She was not looking at her food. She was looking at the table where Rail, Yiv, and Dunn sat together, shoulder to shoulder, like a unit. Her expression was unreadable, but she had not looked away for a long time. By the next morning, word had moved through the intake group the way water moves through a cracked hull, everywhere, all at once. And a name was coming from high command, an evaluator. Someone who chose cadets for assignments no one had a good name for yet. The academy shifted. Rail didn't notice, or if he did, he kept eating his breakfast. Ambassador Vale looked like time itself had gotten tired. He was Surthery, a species that lived long, moved slowly, and had a reputation in galactic politics for outlasting every opponent simply by still being in the room when everyone else had burned out. He was old in the way that old things become architecture. His face carried the kind of stillness that is not emptiness, but rather the result of having seen enough that nothing surprises you anymore. He arrived on a small diplomatic shuttle, without ceremony, carrying 1 bag. He met with Gorith privately for an hour. Then he requested use of a small evaluation room and sent for cadets one at a time. Most cadets came out of those sessions looking either confident or shaken, depending on how well they handled pressure. At Rail session was scheduled for the 4th slot of the day. The evaluation room was plain, 2 chairs, a small table, no visible recording equipment, though everyone assumed there was recording equipment. Vale was already seated when Rail entered. He gestured to the other chair without words. Rail Saturday Vale looked at him for a long moment with eyes that were pale and very steady. Then he spoke. His basic was precise, unhurried, the kind of precise that comes from someone who considers every word before deploying it. I will describe a situation, Vale said. You will tell me what you do. Rail nodded. A transport vessel. It carries 200 beings, families, civilians. It has been caught between 2 faction fleets in active conflict. Both fleets have demanded the vessel identify itself as allied with their side. If it chooses either fleet, the other fleet will destroy it. If it refuses to choose, both fleets will destroy it. You are aboard this vessel. You have no weapons, no political rank. You have 12 minutes. Most cadets, Vale said later in his notes, began solving the tactical problem immediately. They calculated odds. They tried to find a military angle. They treated it as a combat scenario with a missing variable. Rail was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Who is commanding each fleet?" Vale tilted his head slightly. Explain why that matters. Because fleets don't have opinions. Commanders do. If I know who the commanders are, I know whether the situation was created by policy or by ego. If it's policy, I need a political answer. If it's ego, I need a different kind of answer. Vale said, assume you have no information on the commanders. Rail considered. Then I asked for it. 12 minutes is enough time to send one message to each fleet. Not a declaration. A question. Something personal. Something that makes the commander on each side think about the decision as a person making a choice, not a military figure executing a function. What if neither responds? Then I send a third message. To both fleets simultaneously. I tell them the other fleet already agreed to hold fire for 30 minutes to review the situation. I lie. Vale went still in a way that was different from his usual stillness. You would deceive both fleets. I would buy time, Rail said. 30 minutes is enough to find something real, a contact, a shared interest, anything. The lie gets me the time. What I do with the time is what actually matters. Silence. Vale made a small note. His expression had not changed, but something behind it had shifted in the way that heavy things shift, slowly and with significant weight. Most cadets who reach a deceptive solution apologize for it, he said. I'm not sorry for trying to keep 200 people alive, Rail said. Not with heat, just clean and honest. And if the deception fails? If both fleets realize and destroy the vessel anyway? Then I failed, Rail said. But I tried every door. You should always try every door. Another silence, longer this time. Then Vale said, you turn my question into a question about the people asking it rather than the problem itself. Rail looked at him. The people asking the question are always part of the problem. Ignoring them doesn't make the problem simpler. It just makes the answer wrong. Vale set down his pen. He looked at Rail with an expression that was finally, faintly, readable. It was the expression of someone who has been searching for a particular thing for a long time and has just found it somewhere they did not think to look. Where did humans learn this? He said. Not quite a question. We've been failing at things for a long time, Rail said. When your first plan always worked, you never needed a second plan. We always needed a second plan. Vale was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, you may go. Rail left in the corridor. Sova was waiting for her own session. She looked at him when he came out. Her secondary arms were still. Her expression was not mockery. It was something cautious and curious. How did it go? She asked. Fine, Rail said. What did he ask? What I would do in a bad situation. And Rail looked at her. I told him I'd try everything before I accepted that it couldn't be fixed. Sova was quiet for a moment. Most beings accept it faster. I know, Rail said. He walked back toward the barracks. That's the advantage. 2 days later, the assignment list was posted on the central board. Every cadet gathered to read it. The selections were for a field deployment, something real, not a simulation. Rail's name was on the list, but not in a combat role, not as a tactical officer. The posting next to his name read, Liaison, HFY Corridor, Disputed Zone. Sova read it twice. Dunn looked at it without expression. Yiv looked relieved and then immediately worried again. Across the hall, Instructor Gorith was reading the same board. His face was still stone, but one of his 4 hands, almost too slowly to notice, closed into something that might have been a fist of quiet approval. Vale had written one line in the official file before he left. Gorith had read it 3 times. He turned and walked away before anyone could ask him what he thought about it. The HFY corridor had been broken for 60 years, and it looked at point 3 faction territories met at this stretch of space like 3 clenched fists pressed against each other. None of them willing to open, none of them willing to back away. The Drevithi held the north sector. The Salhari occupied the southern belt. The Korith moved through the middle ground in slow patrol arcs that were technically civilian, but were not really civilian. Every peacekeeping force sent into the corridor had either escalated the tension or been pushed out. The current Union presence was a monitoring post, a small station, low weapons profile, officially neutral. Unofficially, everyone was waiting for the next incident. Commander Orith ran the post the way Dravkin commanders ran most things. Walls up, posture firm, language precise and military. He had read Rail's assignment file once, decided the high command had made an administrative error, and moved on with his day. Rail arrived with Yiv and 2 pieces of luggage. Orith looked at them both. Liaison officer, he said, reading the rank notation with the tone of someone reading a word they find genuinely offensive. "Yes, sir," Rail said. "You're aware this is not a diplomatic post. There are no active negotiations. There is no progress to facilitate. I understand. Your role here, as defined by the assignment, is monitoring and local community contact. You are not to engage faction military personnel without clearance. You are not to make any commitments on behalf of the Union. You are not to do anything that could be interpreted as political." "Understood." Orith looked at him for a moment. "Do you have any questions?" "1," Rail said. "Is there a repair log? Station maintenance issues, local settlement requests, anything that needs fixing?" Orith stared at him. "That is not what a liaison officer does." "It's a good way to meet people," Rail said. There was a long pause. Orith handed him the maintenance log. It was thick. For the first week, Rail fixed things, not in a dramatic way. He repaired a water recycler at a small mixed-species farming settlement 3 kilometers from a post. He helped a Salhari elder recalibrate a faulty heating unit. He spent an afternoon helping 2 Drevithi children recover a flock of small domestic animals that had wandered into a storage field. He learned names. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He ate food he had never heard of in company he had never expected, and he asked what things were called in the local dialect and wrote them down. Yiv came with him everywhere. He was not as naturally easy with strangers, but he watched Rail and he tried, and trying mattered. Orith watched the pattern from the post and said nothing. His reports to High Command noted that the human liaison was engaging in, quote, non-standard community activity, unquote. In the 3rd week, a young Drevithi male named Soren, barely past adolescence by a species measure, crossed the demarcation line that he was not armed. He was not making a political statement. He was chasing a livestock animal that had decided fences were suggestions. The animal had wandered into the middle ground, and Soren had followed it without thinking, the way young beings follow animals without thinking. Standard protocol classified unauthorized crossings as potential provocations. The Salhari monitoring beacon logged the crossing and sent an alert. One of the southern faction's response teams began moving. They were inside the corridor in under 3 minutes. Orith was already preparing a counter signal from a post. His hand was on the comm rail, came through the post door at a controlled run, which was different from a panicked run in ways that mattered. He had a Drevithi livestock animal tucked under one arm. It was unharmed and mildly annoyed that he had seen the animal wander an hour ago. He had picked it up quietly and held on to it, watching the horizon, not sure why yet. Just a feeling. The kind of feeling that comes from paying attention to small things long enough to see the pattern they're part of. He walked out into the middle ground. No weapon, no comm signal, just himself and the livestock animal, and met the Drevithi boy in the open space before the Salhari response team arrived. He handed the animal to Soren. He said the boy's name because he knew it. He said it in the right dialect because he had written it down. The Salhari response team reached the edge of the zone. They saw a young Drevithi male, clearly non-military, holding a livestock animal. They saw a Union liaison officer standing next to him, unarmed, relaxed, in no provocation. No posture. Nothing to respond to. They held. The moment lasted about 40 seconds. Then the Salhari lead officer sent a hold signal to her team and turned them back. Soren looked at Rail with wide eyes. He said something in Drevithi. Rail translated for Yiv later. He asked why I had his animal. What did you tell him? I told him it was looking for him. Back at the post, Orith filed his report. He stood at his terminal for a long time before he typed anything. When he did, he used 2 lines to describe what Rail had done and 4 lines to describe the outcome. The outcome was no incident, no casualties, no escalation. The Salhari response team had gone back without firing. That had not happened in 11 years of monitoring post records. That evening, a message came to the post civilian channel. It was addressed to the Union Liaison Office, specifically to Rail. It was from a Korath settlement coordinator named Hevith, who said simply that she had heard about the water recycler repair, and that if the liaison was willing, her settlement had a list of things that needed looking at. And then, below that, almost as an addition, that she thought perhaps other people would like to talk. Not formally, just talk. Rail read the message twice. He wrote a reply. He did not tell Orith about it yet. He would, but not yet. Yiv read over his shoulder. Is that what I think it is? It's a door, Rail said. We'll see what's behind it. The meeting had no official name. It was not a summit. It was not a negotiation. It had no agenda circulated in advance, no record of attendance filed with anyone, no political weight attached to it at all. That it was, on paper, a maintenance inspection of Hevith's settlement water system. Rail had brought tools. He had also, over the course of 2 weeks, had 7 quiet conversations with 7 different people from all 3 factions. Not about politics, not about the 60-year standoff, not about territory or rights or any of the things that had been argued into exhaustion. About children, about the coming cold season, about a particular kind of grain that grew in the middle ground that all 3 factions harvested, but none of them had ever harvested together. None of those people knew they were part of a pattern. Rail had not told them. He had just listened, asked careful questions, and stored the answers the way you store dry wood, slowly, without making a fuss, because you know winter is coming. Hevith was Korith, long-limbed, precise in her movements, with the direct manner of someone who had spent years managing things that did not want to be managed. She had agreed to host. She had not asked many questions. The 3 who came were not leaders. That was intentional. Leaders carried too much history. These were practical people, a Drevithi settlement coordinator named Farron, a Salhari engineer named Bosk, and Hevith herself. People who dealt with problems daily and had long since gotten tired of problems that never moved. They sat at a plain table in Hevith's back room. Rail did not begin with the conflict. He asked them each one question. What did they want for the beings who would live in this corridor after them? Farron looked at the table. Then he said, enough water. Bosk said, safe passage to trade. Hevith said, for their children to not have to sit in rooms like this one. Rail nodded. He did not immediately offer solutions. He let the words sit. He had learned, from a long time of watching arguments, that solutions offered too fast feel like dismissals. First, people need to know their words landed. Then he said, all 3 of those things are possible in the same corridor. None of them require the other 2 sides to lose anything. The conversation that followed was not comfortable. There were moments of silence that had sharp edges. Farron said things that Bosk clearly did not like. Bosk said things that made Hevith look away. But no one left. Rail said very little after that opening. He asked questions when things locked. He rephrased things when words got tangled in faction dialect. When the temperature in the room rose, he found a factual detail, a crop yield figure, a shared infrastructure cost that cooled it back down. Yiv sat in the corner and kept a quiet record point 2 hours and 40 minutes after it started. Hevith said, I would be willing to send a formal message to the Northern Administration if Farron's settlement sent one at the same time. Farron looked at her for a long time. Then he said, I would need to speak to my settlement council. That was not a yes, but it was not a no. In 60 years of the Ashvari corridor, most meetings had ended with nothing. This one ended with Farron saying he needed to make a phone call. Rail walked back to the monitoring post in the early dark. You've kept pace beside him. Did that work? You've asked. Something moved, Rail said. Whether it keeps moving is up to them. But you got them talking. They were always willing to talk. No one had asked the right question yet. Orith filed his mission report 2 days later. He stood at the terminal longer than usual. He wrote 1 paragraph, deleted it, wrote another. What he eventually submitted used the phrase non-standard liaison methods and noted that the corridor had logged 0 incidents for the longest continuous stretch in 11 years. He said nothing to Rail directly. But the morning after the report was filed, Orith stopped at the doorway of the small room where Rail was reviewing settlement maps and said, the maintenance log you requested last month. I've updated it with 3 new entries. Rail looked up. Thank you. Orith nodded once and left. Ambassador Vale arrived at the Academy review 6 weeks later. Rail and Yiv were both recalled for formal evaluation. The review board was small, Gorith present by comlink from the Academy, 2 high command observers, and Vale himself. Vale presented the Ashvari corridor field report. He read the statistics without emphasis. Incident count, settlement interactions, outcome of the informal meeting. The numbers were modest. No treaties, no dramatic breakthroughs. But the line at the end of the report noted that all three faction settlements had submitted a joint infrastructure request to the Union for the first time in recorded corridor history. That a joint request. Three factions. One document, one of the high command observers said. How? Vale said. He asked them what they wanted for their children. Silence in the room. Gorith's comlink was quiet for a moment. Then his voice came through, flat and deliberate. The physical assessment scores are still on record. Yes, Vale said. They're still low. Yes. Vale opened the official file on his terminal. I have added a classification note. He read it aloud. Possesses qualities that cannot be measured by existing instruments. Recommend classification. Irreplaceable asset. Gorith said. Approved. Then the comlink closed. Later, outside the review chamber, Yiv stood next to Rael in the corridor. He had been quiet since the session ended, the way he got quiet when something had moved him and he hadn't found words for it yet. Eventually he asked, the title, The Oldest Metal. What does that mean? Rael was looking out through the corridor window at the stars. They were somewhere between the academy and the corridor, between one place and the next, the way they always seemed to be. The academy wanted armor, Rael said. Claws, venom, things that break other things. And you didn't have those. No, he was quiet for a moment. But I had the thing that made all of those worth anything. Yiv waited. Stubbornness, Rael said. The kind that doesn't let you leave a broken thing broken. The kind that keeps asking the next question after everyone else stopped asking. Humans have been making it since before we had fire. He looked at Yiv. You can't mine it. You can't measure it on a board. But it's older than everything else we brought to the galaxy. You've thought about this for a long time. Then he said, I think I'm starting to make some of it too. Rael looked at him. Something in his expression was warm and certain and quiet. I know, he said. I've been watching.